Hey, it's Scott and John from T is for Tactical, and today we're going to talk about grip and how to grip handguns. And what I usually try to do is I try to take things from a humanistic standpoint and look at how people in general handle tools, whether they be a hand tool or a power tool or a firearm, and how those things relate to marksmanship and also safety. So when you look at how people grip things, and I'll just grip this power drill for a second, is that it's manufactured so that I grip the drill and that my index finger automatically falls on the activator button or the trigger if it was a handgun, all right? So when we take that into account for safety, when we grip a handgun, automatically what happens is we put our hand grip on the gun and then our finger naturally falls on the trigger. So from a safety perspective, what we really want to do is we want to condition ourselves to get away from that and make sure that we're indexing our finger alongside the frame of the firearm until we're ready to shoot, all right? So I figured I'd address the safety first and then we can kind of move on from there. The other aspect is that you have to consider a couple different phenomena that occur. One is you want to develop marksmanship and you also want to develop recoil management. In order to develop recoil management, again, you have to have the correct grip. And in order to maximize your marksmanship, you also have to place your grip on the handgun in the correct manner so that your finger is falling on the trigger the right way. So basically what happens when people grip a handgun for the first time or whatever the case may be is that they're a little reluctant to grab the handgun and they end up grabbing the gun and putting their hand on the trigger putting their hand on the grip so the gun kind of falls in the hand this way, right? Really what you want to do is you want to make sure that you make a V with your hand grip right here, your hand, and put the center line of the axis in line with the center line of that V. All right, so everybody's hand is different. And handguns were really made for 85% of the population. That's why it's not really a one size fits all. And I'm going to talk about grip panels a little bit and how they relate to not only your grip, but also marksmanship. So what we have here is we have a standard grip on the gun. And first of all, I established that V that I was talking about. And I take the three fingers that I have right here, the index, the ring, and the small finger, and I wrap that around the front of the handgun. And my thumb basically kind of just lies out there. It doesn't really do a whole lot, all right? But from this position here, what I want to do is I want to grip the gun up as high as possible because remember that the gun recoils backward, right? And I want to reduce as much muzzle flip as I can. The next thing that I see here is I have a ridge of knuckles here, right? So when I place my non-shooting hand onto the gun, I want to cover that ridge with a valley. And when I do that, I make the valley here. When I do that, that allows for an isosceles triangle. So an isosceles triangle means equal legs, equal angles right here, so that when I produce or bring the gun up, my sights are basically naturally pointed in a natural point of aim right at my target. I don't have to spend a whole lot of time refining my sight picture, which is an added benefit of finding the right grip. So the next thing we'll talk about here is I'm going to take my chamber flag out. You can see this is a non-loading handgun. When I put my finger on the trigger, right? And I'll put my slide forward so we can work on this a little bit better. When I put my finger on the trigger, you can see that my finger falls into the trigger guard. And this is, again, when I'm going to shoot. And I have this much finger coming out here. Now, naturally, what my hand wants to do when I push this trigger backward is I have a natural movement of the gun going to the left. Now, how many shooters are you out there? Have you gone to the range and you're having a problem as a right-handed shooters? Well, my shot impact, I'm aiming here, but my shot impact is down over here. Well, this could be one of the factors that falls into your trigger control and also your grip. They're both related. So what I recommend is that when you grip the handgun, again, I'll put the slide forward so we can do a dry fire here. When you put your finger on the trigger, put your finger on the trigger so that it works this lever, because that's what the trigger really is. It's a lever, right? There's an axle here and there's a lever right here that goes back and forth, right? Goes back and forth just like this, right? So when I put my finger on the trigger, I put my finger on the trigger, so there's a little gap right here, and that trigger comes straight back, okay? Again, if I put too much finger on the trigger, my natural motion of my hand is to go like this, and I end up pushing the trigger this way, right? Rather than pushing the trigger straight back, okay? So next thing we're going to talk about when you think about trigger press and you think about your grip and how these things are interrelated is, again, you have to find the best thing that works for you. Now, Glock, VP9, I think some of the Walthers and a lot of the other manufacturers, they give you this nice little insert of grips that come with your gun, right? And everybody takes these and you either chuck them or you just ignore them. So really what happens is that these grips are allowed or manufactured so they actually increase the length of your hand grip. And what this does, it's not only for hands to fit the gun the right way, it's also for you to fit your trigger or your finger on the trigger the correct way. So here's a Glock 19, right? Has a grip panel installed, right? Here's a Glock 19 without a grip panel installed. You can see the difference between the two, right? This one here is a lot longer in the grip. This one here is a lot shorter in the grip. So when I put my hand on this trigger with the grip, and I'm not talking about feel, I'm not talking about how it feels in your hand, because really what you have to do is you have to adjust your grip. You have to adjust that so-called feeling to be able to shoot the gun the correct way, right? So when I put my hand onto the gun and I wrap my hand around here like this, my finger, again, automatically falls on the trigger a little bit deeper. Okay, so that again allows for this motion, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but allows for that motion to go to the left. Again, that's a contributing factor that when we go to the range and we have these rounds going from where we think they're impacting here and they go over here, that's, like I say, a contributing factor as to why. So what I recommend is that you take the grip panels and you bring them to the range with you, and you practice. You swap the grip out and put them in there. Glock, they give you an extra pin so that you can insert that in there. I know that Wilson Combat makes an extended pin. I actually put these in this gun right here, the Wilson Combat extended pin, because it just fits a little bit more flush, so that you have a pin coming out on this side and they have a pin coming out on this side, and it makes everything nice and tight, so to speak. It doesn't. There's not a gap. The one that you get from Glock is going to be recessed a little bit, and it's not going to be. It almost looks like it'll pop out. I don't think that it will, but I don't want to take a chance like that. So I went to Wilson Combat, and for $3 or $4 you can get those extra pins, and you can make sure that they cover the whole length. They go from side to side here. That's basically what I'm talking about. All right. So listen, so when you go to the range, there's a couple different things that you can check for, and you can see how your grip is. Maybe not a bad idea to either go with a partner or take your video camera with you and sit with you. But if you're noticing that under recoil that the gun is moving in your hand and you have to re-grip the gun after every second or third shot, your grip is probably not where it should be. Okay, it probably needs to be tightened up a little bit. And we can work on some of the ergonomics with your hand a little bit and see how these things work. I don't know the name of the tendons, but really when you look at the way I close my hand, when I pull this tendon down here, right, it naturally pulls my ring, middle, and index finger, okay? Now, we don't want that because really our index finger on our strong hand controls our trigger pressing and controls our trigger control. Okay, so what we need to do when we're gripping that gun is what could be beneficial to you is that you grip the gun from the front of the hand grip to the back of the hand grip. In other words, you're not gripping it like you would a hammer. Okay, and this is one of the things you might be used to, right? You walk around the house and you're hammering, you're putting a hammer, you're putting a nail into the wall, and you're gripping the circumference of the hammer, right? Because that's the way that the hammer works, and that's what we're conditioned to as people. Same thing with we put a screw into an object, we're going to screw that gun in there or screw that screw in there, and all of a sudden it's going to catch, and we're going to grip, and the gun's going to torque this way, or the screw gun's going to, the drill is going to torque that way. We have to take into consideration what happens with the handgun, and the handgun basically recoils back and forth, which we may not be accustomed to. All right, so again, what I advocate is not gripping the gun around the circumference, but gripping the gun from front to the back, almost like you're squeezing in a vise, okay? So if I do that, right, this allows me a little bit more index control, or a little bit index finger control, rather than gripping the gun around the circumference of it. And this also allows for, I don't say it allows for, but you can be on your way to an accidental discharge if you're gripping the gun with such force that all of these fingers mash together, right? And we're in a position where we stumble or we bump into something, we have a sympathetic reaction, right? And the next thing you know, we have an AD or a UD because of what we bumped into or what we did. Right, so again, this is a safety issue. It's also a marksmanship issue. We want to make sure we index our finger on the frame of the firearm, right here, and then that'll inoculate or prepare us or prevent us from having an AD or UD when we bump into something or we're startled or whatever the case may be. But again, the bottom line is that we want that independence between our grip and our trigger finger, and in order to get into the weeds of that a little bit, realize what's happening here when we're firing a handgun, when we're discharging a handgun. The handgun's recoiling, right? And the handgun is pushing back against us, and it really is pushing back against us with both hands. And this is what we call a gross motor skill. You're pushing back against it inadvertently, right? You're pushing back against that recoil. And again, this is another compounding factor that makes us shoot down and to the left when we're a newer shooter rather than shooting here. And the thing that we don't notice is that that's all being masked because the gun is recoiling, right? So this is where some of the things like dry fire come into play, and really working the gun dry and practicing and making sure that we're doing the right things the right way. Perfect practice makes perfect, right? And also take into consideration that, again, when the gun is recoiling, when we're in a combat situation, when we're fighting, right? We're in this position here, when we're anticipating this recoil or realizing that recoil is going to happen. Again, that's a gross motor skill. What we need to do is we need to control this trigger, and that's a fine motor skill. That's a fine motor skill, okay? So this would be the equivalent of you trying to maybe hammer with one hand and then send a text message with the other. This is why handguns are kind of like, I don't say notoriously hard to shoot, but they just are. You have to put your sweat equity into it, okay? So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just demonstrating some of the things, the relation of grip, how the human being relates to grip and what the human body wants to do when it grips an object like a handgun, and and how all those things interface. Now, I want to give you a little bit of advice for people who go for their first handgun. Get a handgun that has enough working surface area on it so that you can clear malfunctions, so that you can load, unload, reload without having too small of hand areas. And again, just an example here is that this is a good self-defense handgun, maybe not a great gun for concealing in the summertime, right? Maybe this is, and again, same model here, right? Glock 19, same model here. This is a little bit smaller for me. Appendix carry, 3 o'clock carry over here. If I put a shirt over top of me, I'm going to be able to manage this. I'm going to be able to do this. T-shirt weather, maybe not so much, or if it's really hot and humid, right? So if it's really hot and humid and I decide to carry one of these guys here, one of the micro pistols, just take into account what happens with your grip, okay? And again, we're talking about 9mm, right? And the recoil that's associated with 9mm. And again, all of our features that we have here. So can you reach them? Can you get to them in a timely basis so that you'll be able to defend yourself? Make reloads, unloads, make safe, okay? So from this position here, again, not index, but orient that slide release, orient that safety so that when I present out, I can disengage that safety and get used to those things. Realize that this gun is going to be a little bit smaller in your hand and maybe have a little bit different recoil feeling, so make sure that you grip it up high and get that V back here. And again, we're locking those elbows. So again, just to repeat some of the facets here, or some of the technique here, when I present or when I grip and I take my grip and I cover this ridge with this valley, I might be overwrapping or overextending this hand here. But again, what this allows for is that isosceles triangle, and I can see from right here that my sights are automatically, or not automatically, but naturally lined up. So I really don't have to do anything but refine that sight picture when I present out towards my target, all right? So again, take into relation the size of the grip, the size of the gun, how all those things work together. And really the best thing that you can do is to practice with the gun dry. So you're not at the range, you don't have to worry about recoil, you don't have to worry about other shooters. The guy 2 ports down from you with an AR-15 with a muzzle brake that's going all over the place. So listen, I hope I gave you some good advice. I would say get the gun in your hand every day if you can. Dry fire, practice, and get used to how that gun fits in your hand. And I hope to see you next time here on T is for Tactical.